Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. It is season 1, episode 20, and joining me as always is Austin Davidson from Long Island, New York.
Heyo.
I am back in Brockport, New York for my usual spot from where I broadcast from, getting closer to the beginning of the next school semester, and that also means it's playoff time in the NFL. We already covered the first couple games in the last game that will be going on this weekend. As a matter of fact, the first game between the Texans and Raiders is at halftime right now. It's 13-7, right, Austin?
Yep.
The Texans are holding a 13-7 lead. That game should be coming out of halftime momentarily. That game is largely, I guess, the game we thought it was going to be, at least so far. Maybe a little bit better, but we haven't had high expectations for it. But luckily, if you're a Steelers fan, you're going to see what you're hoping to be is the best game on Sunday. You've got the 10-6 Dolphins, the 6th seed coming into Pittsburgh, the number 3 seed with an 11-5 record. And this game, a lot has been made of the last time they played, which was way back in Week 6 before we were even doing this podcast. The Dolphins handled the Steelers pretty handily by a score of 30-15. Key things that happened in that game: Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. A lot of key players on the Steelers right now were not playing in that game, and Jay Ajayi, probably most memorably, went for over 200 yards in that game. A lot has changed since then, but in recalling that game, why did the Steelers lose that game, Austin?
Big Ben had a rough day on the road. He only threw one touchdown and 2 interceptions. Also, the leading receiver of the team in both catches and yards was Le'Veon Bell. Never a good thing if your receivers aren't playing well. The Steelers didn't force a turnover also, which didn't help. Then, of course, poor tackling and bad play led to the breakout of Jay Ajayi, who had 25 carries for 204 yards, a whopping average of 8.2 yards per carry. I mean, a lot came off of one giant run, but that's still impressive. It was overall just a really messy game on the Steelers' part, as every area struggled in some regard. I would also like to mention the starting linebackers were as follows: Lawrence Timmons, which is normal, but then it went Vince Williams, Jarvis Jones, and Anthony Chickillo. And I had to go back to watch the game again because I didn't believe that when I read it. But that is a true statement. I went back to look and check myself. Jarvis Jones and Anthony Chickillo were starting at linebackers.
Wow.
What do you remember from the game?
Well, actually backing up a little bit, I believe this game happened like the day after we met or something like that. I remember we talked a little bit about this game, but Gina had dragged me to the outlet mall, so I didn't get to see much more than the first quarter of this game. But what I remember is I was kind of happy to just not see it because it was an ugly game all around. You kind of touched on it, basically. There wasn't much to like from this game at all. The Steelers' best running play came from Darius Hayward-Bay, who scored on a 60-yard run, but that was about the only good thing that happened on offense. Bell had 10 carries and 15 touches on his own. That's clearly not enough. And Antonio Brown was held in check. Nobody else stepped up at the receiving position. Ben Roethlisberger had a rough day. He got roughed up. Darius Hayward-Bay got injured in that game, too. A lot of people don't remember. And on the defensive side of the ball, you need look no further than Jay Ajayi and his 204-yard day. He had 6 explosive plays, including his last play. Even if you take his last play away, he has, I think, 145 yards and is still averaging well over 5 yards a carry. So even without that big run, it was clear that the Steelers' defense wasn't stopping the run. They allowed a couple of big plays through the air, but there really wasn't much to like about that game. Luckily for the Steelers, there's a lot different about this game, whether it's both personnel on defense for the Steelers or personnel changes on offense and defense for the Dolphins, or the fact that this is simply at home. A lot's going to be different about this game now, 12 weeks later. So let's take a quick look at the injury report. It's pretty short for the Dolphins, but you've got some key guys here, including Ryan Tannehill. The starting quarterback was just recently ruled out. You have Craig Urbick, the guy who's replacing injured center Mike Pouncey, who's out for the season. He's questionable, but practiced all week. You've got Bakari Rambo, the safety, who is questionable. You have Tony Lippett, the cornerback, who is questionable. Jelani Jenkins at linebacker is questionable, and Byron Maxwell, the best cover corner on the Dolphins who kept Antonio Brown in check last week, he's doubtful. So that's a lot of key injuries, even if the injury report is somewhat short, as opposed to the Steelers. On the Steelers side, you've got Anthony Chickalo and Ricardo Matthews were already ruled out at linebacker and defensive end, respectively. And you've got Vince Williams, who's questionable with the shoulder injury. It's looking like he might be unable to play. On the positive side, Stephon Tuitt is looking like he's going to be able to play. Around other players, you have Justin Gilbert, who was injured last week in the game against the Browns, but he was a full participant. Sammy Coates was a full participant all week. It looks like he will be back. Xavier Grimble was a full participant. And Johnny Maxey was limited in Wednesday and Thursday, but was a full on Friday, so hopefully he'll be able to play. So the big question marks now are is actually pretty much exclusively with Ladarius Green, who after having 2 full practices on Wednesday and Thursday did not practice at all on Friday. That's a very concerning thing going forward. Maybe some of his concussion issues flared up again because he didn't pass it, and he would be a huge loss for a Steelers offense that, outside of him, it seemed like it was finally looking like it was going to be healthy, Austin.
It's very sad, honestly. We started writing this podcast script a few days ago, and I already had him written in so many things after seeing that he was a full participant for 2 days in a row. And then it came back that he failed the last part of the concussion protocol. Just the last part, the neurologist exam. And it's just a shame that he probably won't be able to make it out of the concussion protocol in time for this game. It's just sad.
It really makes you wonder if, because he's had a concussion history, including earlier this year, it really makes you wonder how much more he has left in the tank, or if he's someone that could even come back from a concussion this year. Obviously, it's a week-by-week thing, but when you've had this many concussion issues, you have to wonder if his personal health is going to start to play a factor in how much he wants to continue playing. But obviously, that's another issue we can discuss at another day. For right now, however, we already know who's going to be replacing him, assuming he doesn't play, in Jesse James, Xavier Grimble, and David Johnson at the tight end position. Clearly, they have their own set of skills, but none of them can make up for what Ladarius Green does. However, the Steelers will be getting a couple players back in this game that they didn't have in the last game, including Marcus Gilbert. I saw you wrote about him a little bit. You want to talk a little bit about the offense's matchup against the Dolphins' defense this week?
This is a much favorable matchup than last time. As you said, Marcus Gilbert will be playing in this game, who didn't get to play last time. Big Ben has long since recovered from the injury he sustained in that game against the Dolphins, which, if you watched, you saw that coming out after the injury, Big Ben was not as mobile. He wasn't as accurate. It really affected him. Not to mention, the Dolphins are without 2 of their starting safeties, as they had lost, at least had. I apologize. One second.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost my track, but okay. Not to mention, the Dolphins are without 2 of their starting safeties that they had at least had for part of the game last year, Rashad Jones and Isa Abdul-Quddus. For those who don't remember, Jones got hurt against the Steelers and then got put on IR. They're also looking to be without starting cornerback Byron Maxwell, who's been listed as doubtful. I expect the offense to do much better as a whole this time against a depleted Dolphins secondary. Antonio Brown got shut down last time, but this time I think he has a big game. What is the offense looking like for you?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be a big game for the Steelers offense. For those who don't know, this is going to be the first time the Steelers triplets of Ben, Bell, and Brown will be on the field together in a playoff game. 2013, the Steelers didn't make the playoffs. 2014, Bell was injured both in 2014 and 15, and obviously Brown didn't play in a couple of games, including the one last year after the Vontaze Burfict hit. So I think they're all itching to be playing together, and I think they're going to do a pretty good job, even though on the overall year they've scored only about 25 points per game, which is a little under the 30 points per game that they had been hoping for. But this group over the last 7 weeks has come together behind the strong play of the offensive line and more specifically Le'Veon Bell. the rushing attack has led the way when not much else was going right early in the win streak. And as time has gone on, other players like Ladarius Green, Kobe Hamilton, and specifically Eli Rogers have stepped up in a big way during this win streak. The Dolphins' 30th ranked rush defense should give the Steelers a lot of optimism for what they have been doing lately and what they are probably going to want to do going into this game. But what's going to help even more is the fact that the Dolphins are going to be without 7 of their 11 highest paid defenders, and most likely including, as I mentioned earlier, top cover corner Byron Maxwell, who did a good job on Antonio Brown in Week 6. Brown, I believe, had under 50 yards and only, I think, 4 or 6 receptions in that game. No matter how you want to cut this up, the Steelers are going to have an advantage in pretty much every department. The one thing they want to look at is Cameron Wake and Dominican Sue and Andre Branch for the pass rush. But outside of that, the Steelers boast some pretty good matchup advantages. And the other thing to remember is that they're going to be a little bit shorthanded on the defensive line. And they're going to need to play in a sense that they take what the defense gives them. And by that I mean, with the Dolphins missing a lot of their secondary, they may try to sell out and try to stop the pass play with a couple deep safeties to cover up with the fact that their starting safeties are out. If we see that, then I'm sure we're going to see a lot of Le'Veon Bell. We'll probably see a lot of him either way, but if they're going to play with 2 high safeties, you have to let Bell go downhill, let him make the Dolphins pay for not trying to load up the box and get some yards underneath. And if they do bring guys in the box, or if they end up eventually bringing guys in the box, obviously you go play action. And with Maxwell out, I expect to see Ben Roethlisberger try to take the top off the defense, especially if you're missing a lot of those guys down there, and let the pass to open up the run. So really, like I was saying, the Steelers have advantages whether it's in the run or the pass. And like I said, the only thing you have to look out for is Cameron Wake on the outside and Ndamukong Suh in the middle. The Steelers haven't been the type of team to score 30-plus points a lot this year, like I mentioned earlier, but I still think they have a lot of opportunities to score in this game. I think they win the time of possession battle, and I think there's just too much going for them not to score at least 3 times on offense and get a couple field goals. I think they can get at least 27 points. What about defense, Austin? How are the Steelers going to stop Jay Ajayi this time around?
The difference makers are going to be Shazier and Davis, with no doubt in my head. Shazier was another one to be out against the Dolphins the first time around, and when he's healthy, he's probably the Steelers' most dangerous defense player. As for Sean Davis, he didn't see a single snap against the Dolphins, and now he's the Steelers' Rookie of the Year. I think that speaks enough. And overall, the defense is going to be better this time against the Dolphins, who have Matt Moore starting at quarterback and former Steelers offensive lineman Craig Urbick starting at center for Mike Pouncey, who is out. It's just they're just going to have to make the plays. Shazier and Davis are going to be the players to be stopping Jay Ajayi. Maybe not every play, because obviously Davis is the safety, but I think Shazier is going to play a big role in that. How do you think they're going to work against Jay Ajayi and Matt Moore?
Well, it's been the narrative all week. Remember what happened in Week 6 when Ajayi ran for 204 in Week 6, and how much the Steelers' defense has improved since then. Well, I think both of those narratives may be somewhat overstated in the sense that I don't think Jay Ajayi is as good as his numbers are, simply because he has 3 200 rushing yard games, and 2 of them came against the Bills, so he's still a great running back. I don't think he's as great as people think he is or was led to believe after that Steelers game. And I believe that the Steelers' defensive play the last few weeks has kind of tapered off their growth a little bit. I still think they're getting better, but maybe they're not at the level we thought they were a few weeks ago. But all things considered, I think they're going to play a lot better this week when it comes to tackling and not allowing the big play. I think as a defensive unit, when you look at that tape of the Dolphins game, you can't help but feel embarrassed. And you know that when they look at that tape, they're not going to want to be embarrassed again. They may have some trouble bringing down Ajayi. They may miss a lot of tackles, or they may miss some. They may not play at their best, or the way that we know that they can at all times. But I think the key difference is going to be, like you mentioned, Ryan Shazier and Sean Davis playing in this game as opposed to not playing in the last game. I suspect the coverage and tackling is going to be much better overall. My apologies. I just lost my place. Another key addition to this defense will be the fact that Stephon Tuitt will be returning to the lineup. And even though Ricardo Matthews has been ruled out, there's another concern on the defensive line where depth player Johnny Maxey is also hurt. He fully participated in practice on Friday, but the concern is that you usually want 5 defensive linemen healthy and playing in a game. And if Maxey and Matthews are out, and we know Matthews is already out, that's going to leave you with 4 guys. So I think the key difference will be on the defensive line to make sure that you aren't getting beat too often, you're taking up double teams, you're not getting moved off the ball too much, and you're not getting tired. That's the big thing in a game like this when the weather's going to be cold. You know they're going to run the ball. You can't get tired out because it's going to be a long haul type of game. Luckily, in the Steelers' favor, they are missing a couple offensive linemen, including former Pro Bowler Mike Pouncey at center. Have had some inconsistent offensive line play. Austin, I don't know how you feel about Matt Moore. Personally, I think he's one of the league's better backup quarterbacks, and I think really the only noticeable difference between him and Ryan Tannehill is Tannehill's mobility. But I think Matt Moore is a very poised backup quarterback. I don't think a playoff game noise is really going to rattle him that much. What do you think?
I really don't think so either. I've said a few times off the podcast that I think Matt Moore is basically the same as Tannehill, like you said. The mobility is really it. It's not that I don't think Tannehill. It kind of is. I think Tannehill is just an average quarterback. He's not awful, but he's not great either. He doesn't really do anything that makes me want to say like he's anything better than just average. So I think the same with Matt Moore. I think Matt Moore is just average. So I think they could do this similar thing. I'm not taking this lightly that, there's a backup in where, like, against a team like the Patriots, I guess, even though they're back, I guess that's not a good comparison because their backups apparently are great too.
Yeah, Garoppolo's pretty good.
It's just not a big deal. It's really not a big deal in my eyes.
I can appreciate that, and while I never really thought that much of Ryan Tannehill, and I still think Matt Moore is a decent backup. And the way I see it is he's still a competent NFL-level quarterback, unlike the 2 guys we're seeing go toe-to-toe right now in this playoff game. For those who are curious, the Houston Texans are winning 20-7 now. Connor Cook just sacked again. And, boy, this game is not pretty, Osweiler and Cook right now. So I wondered, do you think Landry Jones, just out of curiosity, is Landry Jones better than both of those quarterbacks playing right now? He is better than Connor Cook, but I mean, is he better than Brock Osweiler?
Ooh. Oh, that's a hard one. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say yes. I was gonna say no, but I'm going to say yes. I think Brock Osweiler is really bad. Brock Osweiler's made some really bad reads from what I've seen. And I think Landry Jones is similar where he makes bad reads, but I feel like he does it less often. Brock Osweiler throws way more pickable passes than Landry Jones, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So as sad as it sounds, I think I'm going to go with Landry Jones. It might be biased because I'm a Steelers fan, but I don't really like Landry Jones. So I think that might cancel out the bias.
Well, you know that there aren't many people who dislike Landry Jones like I do, but at the same point, I think Brock Osweiler is one of my least favorite quarterbacks in the NFL. There isn't really anything that he does that I like, and I thought him getting the money he's been getting in Houston was completely undeserving. And like I said, as much as I don't like Landry Jones, I'd take him in a heartbeat over Brock Osweiler. So anyways, I just wanted to ask you that because the game is on. Let's get back to the topic at hand. You wanted to ask a question about the difference between the last game in Week 6 and this week, Austin. You want to go ask that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Out of all the players to not play the first time against the Dolphins, which is Marcus Gilbert, Ryan Shazier, Bud Dupree, and Sean Davis, who was going to make the biggest impact this time, do you think? Okay,
well, we're both in agreement here. I'm pretty sure we're both in agreement here about this being on the defense since they have a lot more to prove this time around. I'm going to go with Sean Davis in the secondary simply because I think the secondary made a big turnaround this season when Davis started playing. Not that Shazier not playing isn't a big deal or anything because no offense to Vince Williams, but Ryan Shazier is a much more athletic and well-rounded player than him. But I think the difficulty of being able to throw on the Steelers is something that's going to come into play because you can sell out and try to stop the run, but having an NFL competent quarterback like Matt Moore is going to be difficult. And like we saw in the secondary in the last matchup, they gave up a couple of key plays, even though everything that was in the news was about how Jay Ajayi was running through the Steelers. I think the important part is going to be not allowing the big play to guys like Kenny Stills and his name is slipping my mind. Devontae Parker, I believe, is his name.
Yeah, that's correct.
They are underrated deep threats on the outside, and obviously Jarvis Landry is someone you want to watch on the inside. He caught almost 100 passes. So I think Sean Davis's ability to be good in coverage helps the rest of the defensive secondary, and at the same time, he's also good in run support. He was the Steelers Rookie of the Year for a reason, and I think he's going to be the key difference in the defense in this game as opposed to the game in Week 6 12 weeks ago. What about you, Austin?
I'm going to go with Shazier. One of the first things I remember when thinking about Shazier and when he first got here was, I can't remember if it was really early on or not, but he beat Antonio Brown, and I believe the other was Fitzgerald Toussaint in a race, and that stuck with me forever. A 40-yard dash, something like that. I was like, that's insane. That is some insane abilities. And I think his speed is going to make a difference. What was probably the Steelers' number one problem last time against the Dolphins? It was run stopping. And what is Shazier pretty good at? Run stopping. So I expect Shazier's disruptive play style to not shut down Jay Ajayi, but help keep him rather contained by getting a couple tackles for a loss, getting to the quarterback a few times maybe. I think he's going to be the difference maker here.
Austin, it's a playoff game. Who are you most, as a position group or player, who are you most concerned about for this big-time game?
Oh, it's got to be the defensive line. Last time, they got shredded by Jay Ajayi, and there have only been two Steelers defensive linemen to remain healthy all year, and that's L.T. Walton and Daniel McCullers. Yeah. And they've both seen very small amounts of playing time. Tua is back this week. Probably. He's been full participant, and it's looking like he's going. But the question is, will he be 100% this game? Or is he forcing himself to play knowing how important a playoff game is? I'm scared he might not have a good day because he's coming back from areas that really suck getting injured. I mean, every place sucks getting injured.
It was his ankle, right?
ACL and MCL.
Was it his ankle?
So, what?
Was it his ankle? What was the injury?
Why do you think he sprained his ACL and MCL?
I'm pretty sure it was his ankle.
Oh, okay. Well, still, an ankle is important because he's got to plant it to kind of shift. So I'll still stick with my point. But it's just I'm scared he might not be 100%. We will see. Who do you think? Who are you more worried about for this game?
Well, I can tell you that on the other side of the ball, it's pretty obvious, yes, but the thing is, for me, it's Ben Roethlisberger. It might be cliche to point out the quarterback and say, oh, he's the person I'm most worried about, but everyone's been pointing out the Steelers have one playoff win since the 2011 playoffs and have played in 4 since. And you can have some excuses for some of them, whether it's injuries or not having certain players, but the fact of the matter is the Steelers are going to ride and die with Ben Roethlisberger this postseason. It could be the difference in whether the Steelers lose tomorrow or they make it all the way to the Super Bowl and lift that Lombardi for the 7th time. When he's at his best, he can go toe-to-toe with any quarterback in the league, even Tom Brady. And at his worst, like he was when we were in Buffalo a few weeks ago, we saw that he can keep a team in the game when they don't even deserve to be. With one of the stronger pass rushes in the playoffs coming his way tomorrow, I think his poise and precision in poor weather is going to be needed to make sure that the Steelers win. I think he's capable of it. He's certainly capable of it, and I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to limit his turnovers to either 1 interception or 1 fumble or less. If he can keep from throwing it or turning the ball over twice, the Steelers should win this game. Who's your X factor, or what's the key matchup on both sides of the ball for you, Austin?
It's going to be Alejandro Villanueva against Cameron Wake for the offensive side. Not to disrespect Villanueva, but I believe him to be the worst starting offensive lineman Steelers have. It's not that he's bad; he's just in good company, which makes him the worst of them. So he has to go up against possibly the comeback player of the year in Wake, who has 11.5 sacks this season. And keeping Cameron Wake in check could be the difference in this game. I wrote it down an honorable mention to Marcus Gilbert against Andre Branch, who has 5.5 sacks this year. It just wasn't as important to me because obviously Cameron Wake is having a little bit of a better season, and Villanueva isn't as good as Marcus Gilbert. So I was a little bit more worried there. He was more X factor worthy. How about you on offense?
All right. Well, right now, before I say that, I wanted to say that you were correct about Tuitt's injury. I was getting him confused with Ricardo Matthews. Ricardo Matthews has the ankle injury. Tuitt did have, I think, the MCL sprain or ACL sprain. So you were correct on that matter.
Okay.
Anyways, my X factor and key matchup is Eli Rogers versus the Dolphins outside linebackers and safeties. So depending on what the Dolphins are going to try to do, whether it's load up the box or play back to take away the pass, I think ultimately what they're going to try to do is to try to slow down Le'Veon Bell and walk up their linebackers close to the line of scrimmage. With Ladarius Green likely being out of this game and Antonio Brown being the main guy on the outside, I think Eli Rogers underneath through the middle is going to be the most important matchup, simply because on third down, you know they're going to be trying to bring the rush, and they're going to be trying to double cover Brown. So Rodgers is going to have to be the guy that is open, getting open, making those key catches on third down, and moving those chains, making sure the Dolphins are staying back on their heels, and hopefully, if it's successful enough, scoring a couple times and making sure the linebackers are staying back so they have to respect Eli Rogers. And then once they do that, you can start to push Bell down the field a little more and start running the ball with him a little more. That's my key matchup for this week. So moving on now, what is yours on defense, Austin?
It's going to be Tuitt versus the Miami's offensive line. I'm intrigued to see if he's actually fully recovered and if he will be his same self, as I mentioned earlier. He will be very important trying to slow down Jay Ajayi and also getting to Matt Moore. So this is a very important matchup, and it's really just their offensive line versus our defensive line, I think. Saying that, who is yours?
Well, I'm going to stay in the same position group for us. And while I'm going to be looking at this guy in a different way, Stephon Tuitt needs to play like Stephon Tuitt can. My guy is LT Walton. I think LT Walton needs to play serviceably. He needs to play to not to be the hero. He has to be the guy that can make plays when he's called upon to do it, but he can't be getting pushed around. Excuse me, my apologies. He can't be getting pushed around, and he can't be getting knocked over at times like the Steelers were in Week 6. Over the last few weeks, we've seen him play a lot more with injuries to Tuitt and Matthews, and there are times when he's looked pretty good filling in for those guys, including Javon Hargrave earlier in the year. However, like I said, it's crucial that he doesn't get pushed around too much. The linebackers are going to be needing to get to Ajayi this week because he has the most broken tackles in the NFL this year and the most yards after contact this year. So if he's getting through to the second level without getting touched, that means the linemen are not doing their job, which is what we saw a lot of in Week 6. So if he can be serviceable and someone that doesn't need to dominate a game like maybe we need Stephon Tuitt to play, but we need him to play well enough so that he's not a severe liability. And I think that's the key matchup on defense for me. So, Austin, if the Steelers are going to win, if they do what?
Two things. They group tackle for one. Jay Ajayi has the most yards after contact, as you just said. And their wide receivers are kind of shifty in between Jarvis Landry and Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker. If the Steelers can group up to take them down, to keep them from getting those big games like the one at the end of the Steelers game last time, they should win. Secondly, they need to have Bell rush the ball more. Yes, last time he contributed more in the air, but he only had 10 rushes, that's rough. The Steelers can't allow themselves to become one-dimensional like that, especially when Bell was averaging 5.3 yards per carry on those 10 rushes. It wasn't like he was doing bad. They just gave up on the run game because they were down. But how about you?
Well, for me, it's quite simple on offense. they have to run the ball and win the time of possession battle. We just talked about how the Dolphins' strength is running the ball when you have that backup quarterback in, and on the other side of the ball, you've got Le'Veon Bell. So I think the key is to keep the Dolphins' offense, Jay Ajayi, and the Steelers' most likely tired defensive line off the field by running the ball and converting on third down. If they can keep turnovers to a minimum, and I think commit 3 or less penalties on offense, especially in a day like this where it's probably going to be cold and windy, it's going to be hard to make up for yards when you make things harder on yourself. So I think if they do that only 3 times or less on offense, they'll be in good shape. On the other side of the ball, if they can come up with a couple sacks and a turnover, a little consistent pressure, and then keeping Jay Ajayi under 85 yards and allowing less than 4 third down conversions, I think the Steelers are going to win. So moving on, obviously the Steelers for me are going to lose if Ben Roethlisberger is out of sync with the wide receivers and not moving the ball, converting on those third downs. And defensively, it's the same thing. You got to be able to get off the field on third down. Keeping them on the field leads to those long drives, which tires out the defense. And like I said, penalties will be important. And Austin, how are the Steelers going to lose this game?
If the leading receiver is a running back again, specifically Le'Veon Bell, but that just can't happen. When you have so many pro wide receivers, they need to step up. That game was ridiculous for that fact that the receivers all did so poorly. Even when Antonio Brown is getting double or triple covered, depending on what team he's playing, there needs to be a wide receiver to step up, behind them. Kobe Hamilton only had 1 catch in that game. It was probably the biggest. It was first, I believe, for him, and it was a touchdown.
It was his first. But yep.
That was it. That is the only thing I can remember from a wide receiver doing something good other than Antonio Brown. It's just the wide receivers need to step up. And moving on. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that I don't think that's going to be the case this week because now you have guys like Hamilton. That Hamilton touchdown, I saw a replay of it. It looked just like that touchdown he scored against the Browns last week. But anyways.
It was the exact same yardage.
Oh, wow. Deja vu, huh?
Yeah, 23 yardage.
Huh. Well, that's a little interesting, but in any case, I think it's going to be better this way no matter what, because now you have at least Hamilton for a few catches and you have Eli Rogers now too. I think the big difference, something we didn't even talk about, was the tight ends. Even if Green can't play, I think you can still see Jesse James a few times and maybe Xavier Grimble a couple times in the red zone too. So I think the Steelers are going to have some better luck this time around from their supporting cast. What are your bold predictions for this week, Austin?
My bold predictions, my first one is going to be Jay Ajayi gets kept under 85 yards rushing. My second one is Big Ben is going to throw 4 touchdowns and only 1 interception. My third one is Antonio Brown has a day, recording 2 touchdowns and over 120 yards receiving. And the other 2 touchdowns are going to Ladarius. Oh, I didn't change it. I'm audible right now. It's going to Jesse James and Kobe Hamilton. My fifth one is there have been a lot of predictions for this game for me. I don't think I've ever done 5, but the defense gets 2 interceptions. One is going to Burns and one to Timmons. I'm feeling it. How about you? What are your bold predictions?
For the Dolphins, I have Matt Morris throwing for 285 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he throws 1 interception. He's had 1 turnover in every game he's played in so far. I think Artie Burns is the recipient of this one. I think a lot of those yards come when the game is pretty much over. But I think, moving on, I think Jay Ajayi runs somewhat effectively, but it's a far cry from the performance he had in Week 6, finishing with just 80 yards, but is also struggling to find room and averages just a little under 4 yards per carry. I think the Steelers' offense is going to run away with this game a little bit in the early portion of the game, forcing the Dolphins to abandon the run early on. And I think that's going to happen because, like I said, Le'Veon Bell's got to be hungry. I think it's going to be a huge coming out party for him in the playoffs. I see him going over 150 scrimmage yards. I think he gets 130 of those on the ground and another 50 through the air and adds a touchdown through the air and on the ground to boot. Ben Roethlisberger is going to put up average numbers by his standards, but he plays a clean game, throwing for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. one to Brown and one to Bell, and he plays, like I said, a clean game. No turnovers for him. I think that's going to be my bold predictions for this game. What's your final score prediction for this week, Austin?
I'd say it's going to go 31-16 in Pittsburgh's favor. It's a very similar score to last time, just flip. How about you?
I think the Steelers are going to exact some revenge on the Miami Dolphins and move on to Kansas City next week, ending the Dolphins season by a score of 27-17. The Steelers just have too much in their favor on offense, and I think that's going to play to their favor on defense eventually when the Steelers have the ball for as long as I think they're going to have it. I think Le'Veon Bell's he's going to be a man on a mission. I don't know if how much further the Steelers could go if they win this game, but I think he has the potential to have a very good postseason, kind of like what Santonio Holmes did in the 2009 playoffs on the way to Super Bowl 43. But that is what I believe is going to happen for that game. So moving on, we have a couple other things we wanted to get to. We didn't mention in our last podcast because we were talking about the playoffs in general, but Le'Veon Bell was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Month for December. Quite an accomplishment, don't you think, Austin?
It's the last Steelers player that wasn't a quarterback to do it since Jerome Bettis, so I would say so.
When was that?
2000. Actually, I just said the stat wrong because in 2015, Antonio Brown won it, but it was the last Steelers running back.
Yeah.
My bad.
What you don't remember the year? I think it was sometime in the early 2000s. I think.
Oh yeah, I think it was 2000.
Well, in any case, it's still a big accomplishment, and he's been so good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him play in his first playoff game. And the other thing we wanted to get to that we failed to mention last week, Austin, that you wanna talk about it because you seem pretty interested in it.
No, you can go on.
All right. Well, everyone's second favorite Bengals player, Adam Pac-Man Jones, was arrested this past week on a suspicion misdemeanor assault and disorderly conduct charges. Sorry, that was Tuesday morning in Cincinnati. Jones was later charged with felony harassment for allegedly spitting on a nurse at the Justice Center following his arrest, according to court documents. That is one of the Cincinnati Bengals captains, Austin. You can't make this stuff up about this team. They keep doing stupid things like this, and even if you want to look at it as him as opposed to the team, I don't know. Maybe we should be giving this guy a reward because he went 3 years without getting arrested. That's how crazy this is.
It's so bad. The Bengals players are literally just like. My friend and I discuss all the time how every team needs a scumbag. It's just like almost all the Bengals are scumbags. I shouldn't say that because Andy Dalton's not, AJ Green's not, but it just feels like you only hear about the scumbags of their team. So.
Oh, it really is a mess down there, and I don't know what's going to happen from this, but I don't see how he can be kept on the team with this kind of history now. I think it's time. I mean, unless if he didn't do what is alleged alleged that he did, but I mean, he's been in enough trouble already. I don't know how you could keep him on the team if this ends up being true, but that's just my opinion, of course. Austin, is there anything else you wanted to add to this before we wrap things up on this Saturday night heading into the Steelers playoff game tomorrow?
Nope, still 20-7 in the Texans game, which means my prediction could come true, but that's about it.
Yeah, I have those up. We'll cover those again in our next episode. We can obviously talk during the game. I'll be live tweeting the game unless if you wanted to, Austin. That's up to you.
I'm actually not going to be able to. I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. I usually do, but I just wanted to make the offer because usually I do end up doing it. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Well, we are certainly looking forward to Steelers playoff football, any type of playoff football that isn't this game that we're watching right now. So just real quickly, wanted to throw out that if you have any questions or have any feedback, you want to talk to us, email us. We have our own email, the strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter and Facebook with the handles STS Podcast 1, and we post our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube. Our first episode's on SoundCloud. Our names are Stronger Than Steel podcast on both, and then we have our full library on YouTube. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful night. Enjoy the playoffs today, and go Steelers tomorrow. We're looking forward to that big-time playoff win, all right?
Woo!
All right, take care, everybody.